Welcome to the podcast dedicated to making you a faster cyclist. Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. Coach Jonathan Lee. We have Nate Pearson, our CEO. We also have Hannah Otto with us. Hannah's got a bunch of exciting new announcements. She on Instagram lately, it's been like Christmas following Hannah. Like new brands, new companies every day. It's pretty cool. It's exciting stuff. We also have some sad news probably to share. Maybe. I don't know if it's sad. I don't know if I can make it to Peaks Challenge, Nate.
Why is that, John?
I broke my collarbone.
What?
After 30 years of doing collarbone breaking sports, it finally got me.
You're finally a cyclist.
And yeah.
How does it feel? Welcome.
Yeah. I've caught up to Nate now. I'm a cyclist. So yeah, man, it hurts really, really bad. Yeah, I should go over it, I guess. So I had kind of like, training was going good. I wanted to make sure that I was having some back issues, and I wanted to make sure that on an outside long ride, that sort of a thing on a Saturday, and my training plan, it's set up as a solo ride, and I think it's like 3 hours long. And I was like, yeah, I want to go outside and do that because I've just been riding inside, and I want to kind of figure out what the back's like, figure out some nutrition.
The neck.
Remember what it's, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, remember what it's like to actually ride outside, because I've been inside with weather and schedule and everything else. It's been rough for that. And I decided I was going to be super responsible, Nate. And I've never encountered ice on a road ride, for what it's worth. We live up at elevation. We live where there's snow. I don't ride when there's snow on the ground, right? But I've never encountered ice. Yeah.
Geiger, backside, shadows, there's ice always,
Yeah, and I just avoid that. And I was like, you know what, though? The overnight lows have been so cold where we're at that I'm going to do the responsible thing, and I'm going to drive 90 minutes down to low elevation Sacramento, in that area, in Auburn, and the overnight lows there are like 40 degrees.
Not even freezing.
Zero, yep, not even close to freezing. We're good. And I was going down a really fun descent and in a really tight left-hand hairpin turn, and literally 1 second to the next, I just heard my collarbones crunching and smashed my shoulder and head into the ground. Like, had no clue my hands couldn't even come off the bars. It was that fast of an impact. Like, it was just instant. And I didn't know what happened. And there was a lady that pulled, like, I didn't get knocked out or anything. I was fine there. But I was just like, what in the world just happened going through a turn? And the lady, like, she was pulled over in her car on the outside of the turn, and she like got out of her car and ran over. Then she slipped on the ice. And I had no clue there was ice. It wasn't wet. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't glossy. There's nothing to indicate that it was icy. It was just a stripe. It's like the road had like an irrigation ditch pass underneath it where it's like really thin asphalt, I think. And I don't know if some cold air somehow got in there, but it was an absolutely like brutal impact. Like super savage.
Were turning? Like,
yeah, downhill left switchback hairpin. Like, if you think of those circumstances. So I had like a lot of energy in the bike, in the sense that, like, it's like a lot of G forces, and it just instantly, like, banana peel. My bike didn't even hit the ground. Like, I hit the ground and my bike was above me. It was that much of like a leg sweep.
So your bike's okay.
Yes.
Thank God.
Yes. Yeah. The lever has a tiny scratch on it.
That's it.
And that's it. Yeah. But, yeah. And I broke it in 3 places. I'll put up like the pictures on the screen so people can see, and maybe I'll see if I can like send them to you guys too. But I broke it in 3 places according to the, what's interesting though, really quick. I had a prompting to ask my dad to come with me on a long ride. And that is not normal for me. Like, like I don't just like, they live in a different town and everything else. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I really like the solitude. I like doing that. And then again, I got the prompting. I was like, Dad, do you want to come follow me? And I'm so glad he was, because there was no cell service down there. Cars, even though that one lady was there, cars hardly ever go on this road. I don't know if you've ridden it, Nate. It's the Iowa Hill Road. It's super like famous road down here. And I would have been like stuck and had to like hike out or something. I don't know. Like, I don't know how I would have gotten out. It was a really long climb. Anyways, I was really fortunate. Broke it in 3 places. They said they were going to be able to do surgery in 3 weeks. And in my mind, I just had this like
3 weeks.
Yeah, because apparently up here, all the orthopedic surgeons are completely overrun with all the people skiing and tourists that come up here that don't know how to ski, and they break themselves, and like wrists, I guess, are just like, a dime a dozen having to repair wrists. So I But in my mind, I had this idea, like I saw Mathieu van der Poel break his collarbone, get it plated, come back 2 days later and win a World Cup. And like I saw, and like everyone knows the Matthew Hayman story, right? Where he won Paris-Roubaix after breaking his collarbone, was on the trainer for like 6 weeks or 4 weeks or something, and then just went out and won that. So I was like, I need to get this fixed now. And luckily have a friend who's an orthopedic surgeon who's specializes in hands, but really the arms and the extremities, and is really good at this. And I got in within a few days. It was like 4 days of pain of waiting. And then we got it plated. So it's a full length plate. We thought we were going to just do a few screws. It was 8 screws. And we thought it was going to take 45 minutes, and it took 90, just because it's kind of crazy. Apparently they find all the pieces in you. They put all the pieces
Horrible
together.
statement.
Yes, I know. They put all the pieces together using wire to kind of like secure everything in place, like the bone, like put the jigsaw puzzle together. Then after they get the jigsaw puzzle together, they kind of like have a method of like providing tension to the whole thing. And then they do the plate, and then they do the screws. And he does a special method where he puts the plate underneath the collarbone.
Oh.
So then that way, if you have straps or anything else from a heavy bag, it never interferes with the plate. And that way you can keep the plate the whole time. But it's like severe. It's not going to be a 2-day recovery. It's not like 2 days and I'm back on the bike. And that's been really hard to reckon with over the past week here. Like I also have like some nerve damage, and shoulder damage. I can't really, I can't feel a lot of my shoulder, and then I can't move my arm forward. Yeah. I've got to get that figured out with PT and stuff.
Is it nerves like up here where the collarbone is, down to the side of your shoulder?
It's a separate, well, it might have, I don't know what it came from the surgery or not. From the surgery, they do cut like a whole network of nerves that makes like, kind of like your pec sore, like numb. Like I can't feel my left pec until I get down like to the bottom of it. So, but this is separate. This is like within the shoulder itself. And especially in the front of the shoulder. And it's just such a hard impact that they didn't see any torn ligaments or anything in the shoulder, but the swelling was also so much that they couldn't really get much from it, like in terms of what was wrong there. But it's Peaks Challenge is 6 weeks away as of recording this.
Yeah. So what are you gonna do?
I don't know. 146 miles seems like would be pretty tough. Then there's the other side of it too, where I'm worried that like, is that the best thing for healing the collarbone? Like at first I was just like, yeah, I'm gung ho. I'm all in. It'll be easy. I'll just keep training on the trainer, have the fitness, and we'll show up. But then I'm thinking about like, if it isn't healed, is the best thing to go ride on. It's not gravel or mountain biking, but it's still, from what I've heard, not the smoothest roads for 8 hours, maybe longer in this case.
Hannah, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was going to ask, why do you think some of these people can come back so quickly? Do you think that you had a uniquely challenging break, or do you think that some of these pros just have so many resources that that's what allows them to do it?
Probably both. Like the break I was hoping it was straightforward, and I think that my surgeon's notes were like, it was really messed up in there. So like, it was not a straightforward one. Like the 3 pieces that were there that I saw in the x-ray, it turns out that all of those had a lot of different fractures like within them as well. Because it wasn't like a front impact. It was a direct side one. So it crushed it, so to speak. So I think that it was more complicated. And then I think the shoulder stuff is going to add further. Like there's no way I could support myself on a bike right now. Like with that hand, like number one, it couldn't even reach there. But then number two, like the weight.
Yeah.
But then I also do think, and let's face it too, like if, maybe they're also just tougher and more driven than me. I don't know. But I don't know. They might have some resources, to help with it, whether it's like hypobaric chambers, I've heard can accelerate recovery, that sort of thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like the decision to do an event is like you almost have to make a flow chart in your mind, which I'm sure you've already started, of, the first question being, can you cause more damage? And if the answer is yes, then it's an easy, we don't do the event. And that's usually an answer that your doctor or your PT can give you. And then the next question is, are you safe enough to not crash again? Which is ultimately a decision that you probably need to make. And then from there, I think if the answer is, no, I won't cause more damage, yes, I feel safe, then that third question is, well, what am I waiting for or training for? Like if you have another event coming up that you want to be better at or good at, then just wait. If this is the event, and now I'm not even just speaking to you, I'm speaking to anyone who's dealing with this, is if this is the event that you've been training for a year and you have nothing else for a year after and you're not going to cause any damage and you aren't at risk of hurting yourself more, maybe you just go and you see what happens and you have to take a couple weeks off after because you're really sore and it was a really tough experience and you're tired. But if you have other things to look forward to, just take a beat. It is okay. And so maybe for you, that's the bigger question. As I know this Peaks Challenge, I feel like we've been talking about for a long time, but I also know you and I know that you can easily replace one challenge with another one if needed.
Yeah, that's good advice, Hannah. Nate, what was your recovery like and what was your break like?
Have you, first off, I had 9 screws. So
one
more. I got the KOM for that, the PR. John and I have already talked about this. I kind of like entered with, instead of empathy, with chokes, but we've obviously talked about you breaking your collarbone a bunch. But have you ridden yet on the trainer?
No, I'm here at the office. I'm going to ask for somebody's help because I have rollers at home, and that's what I typically
don't do rollers.
Ain't riding the rollers right now.
No.
Yeah.
Because I think I also, like, if I'm going to spin right now, I need to be, like, sitting upright. Like, I can't even...
Yeah, mountain bike.
Like, and like, putting my hands down and being in that position would be really painful. Even just bending over right now is painful. Like, pretty significantly painful. So, no, I haven't ridden yet.
I think 1 week after I was plated, I was able to ride the trainer. And this is what an athlete messaged me on this. And this is my experience too. It was weird of like endurance, I could do the same. VO2 max, I could do the same. But sweet spot and threshold were incredibly hard. And I don't know why that was, but it was that was just my experience. And I couldn't even finish like a sweet spot workout. And it took a little while to get back. I could go look back in my history, but that was that. How did you, because how many days did you have without surgery?
4 days. A little over 4.
So they were just floating around in there, right?
Oh, that was so bad. It was so
bad,
painful.
right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
What would you have done if you had to wait the 3 weeks? I don't understand.
I don't know.
That is wild.
I don't know. And like you don't realize it, but your entire, like my shoulder, my back, my arm, everything was just like hyper tense trying to hold it together because the collarbone, it's like the trivia thing for like the only thing holding your bone or holding your arm to your body structurally is the collarbone, right? And like when it breaks badly like this, truthfully, like my shoulder was like in like 2 inches, like pushed medially toward the center of my body. It was 2 inches narrower than the other side. And then on top of that, the whole thing was like inches lower. And I was holding it up with the sling and it was still inches lower. Like it was just drooping. And then your muscles would spasm sometimes and the bones would like catch on each other and get stuck.
You can't sleep, right?
Oh no. The pain was so bad. It was horrendous.
So right now, it's much better now, right?
Yeah.
Do you need pain medicine during the day, or do you just or can you, as long as you don't like move it around too much, it's not bad?
Yeah, that was like a kind of a tricky point because I've had some sketchy addictive experiences with Oxycontin when I was a kid. And I was injured a lot, and they used to give that out, I feel like, very freely for injuries, and that was probably not the best choice.
You have no clue, right? They're just like, take this.
I had no clue why I couldn't sleep, and I was having tremors and like cold sweats and like crazy outbursts, and you know what I mean? Like I didn't understand any of it. You know, my parents did, luckily. But so they gave me hydrocodone this time, which is a less severe version of that. And I was only directed to take one of those every 6 hours and then one Tylenol every 6 hours. And now I'm fully off of the hydrocodone. I'm just taking Tylenol right now. So,
that's good.
Glad that I'm off of it.
So the pain has gone down. Like
it has gone down.
Now they have the surgery.
Way more manageable. Yeah. The swelling's gone down too. I've been like super diligent with 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off with ice ever since surgery. So
how's your hunger?
Oh, dude, that's another thing. It's hard. Sorry, this is like a leather couch session, but like
happens to so many people.
when you're training high volume, you eat a lot, right? And and your hunger signals are super high. And after that, like, and ever since then, I have had like zero hunger. But then at the same time, there's like a weird part of habit with like eating. And I've gone to this before. I feel like, and I'm sure I'm not alone. A lot of people are talking or listening, probably feel this way too. I have a very complicated relationship with food and with my body and with a lot of other things like that. And that's been really tough too. Just going through this whole thing of like my hunger signals are completely broken. And at the same time I'm eating, and then I'm not doing anything. So then my body feels terrible. And
but you are doing something. You're healing.
It is
so many.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say I've never been as hungry as when I broke my collarbone. And that's like the extra calories that you need to repair. You have to eat a bunch more. That's like very important.
Crazy thing is like my hunger cues have died. I'm at zero. There's nothing. I haven't been hungry since I broke it. It's like, it's just tricky. So it's really hard trying to, because typically it's all laid out, and I take a very if I take an intuitive approach to eating, that typically drives my hunger cues don't seem to line up with what my body needs. And I either deprive or I take in way too much, and then that causes a vicious cycle. And in this case, they're just not there. So I typically take a very intentional approach with my nutrition. And in this case, I'm not really, I know my body needs a lot of extra calories for training. So I'm not like just dropping back to eating leafy greens and that's it or something, during this time. I'm trying to give my body like the sort of nutrition that I was eating. Of course, I'm not taking down bottles of carb mix or something, but the other stuff off the bike, I'm trying to make sure I'm taking in much, but it's hard because I just don't feel hungry. And
I'm curious.
That causes a lot of weird feelings,
Yeah, I'm curious to follow along with that as the recovery goes on. Like, we're still so early in the process. I'm curious, talking about hunger signals and intuitive eating, emotion can have a lot to do with that as well. And I feel like even in this podcast, I can hear your voice and you can tell you're a little down, a little
I'm
sad,
bummed.
frustrated, tired. And I feel like a lot of the time, all of those emotions can make food not intuitive as well. And so I'm curious, as you start to come out of that hole, as the healing ramps up, as you start to get motivated for reaching some goals again, I'm curious if you'll start to experience more of what Nate experienced of, oh, wow, okay, now it's hitting me. Now I'm super hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you were starving, Nate?
John, I just double checked here, and it's 500 extra calories a day about you're going to need just to repair over maintenance, and then try to aim for like 2 grams of protein per kilogram, or like a gram a pound pretty much. And that right there, that's a whole bunch. Like, you're going to have to supplement and stuff. This is how I thought about it is like, your training has changed. Your training is now recovery and repair. And if you don't, like, you can't worry about this scale right now. I don't even like, if you don't eat enough, I think your body's going to atrophy, and it's going to take it from other protein sources in your body, and you're going to repair and just be weaker and come back. If you say you come back 3 pounds heavier, like, you're going to just blow through that with high volume training in like 3-4 weeks. It's not going to be an issue, especially with you, with how much volume you can do. I would totally, I don't know, try to find a way to get hungry. I know that's hard, but that's not really good advice.
If you think about it that way, what would be a bigger performance gain and loss? Like, not recovering as quickly and starting training 2 weeks later, or being a little bit heavier and starting training sooner?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
To me, it seems very obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, the big concern with the riding portion, 8 hours riding on that race, that sort of thing, is like vibration's very bad for broken bones, right? For bones that are trying to heal each other. It really slows down that healing process. And that's why, like, and it's not, hard hits are bad too, but it's the like constant buzzing and that sort of stuff also that's pretty bad for it. So part of me thinks that, if I'm not nourishing myself sufficiently, then I'm certainly going to be slowing that healing process. And ideally, like, so I have x-rays like set up and scheduled for like the week before is typically when they do them at like 6 weeks, right around there, 5-6 weeks. And I would want to see like some fusing going on with the bones to feel comfortable going. if it's one of those situations that are like, it's not fused yet, then I wouldn't feel comfortable going because that's just going to be a huge amount of buzzing on a bone that really needs to
And
heal.
you said it's 6 weeks? I mean, John, there's no, I already said this to you before, but there's no way you're doing it. Like, we'll get another race. But how old are you?
I'm 37.
Okay. So I think I broke mine at like 38, 39. And the amount of time that
just following in Nate's footsteps.
I know, right? the amount of time.
Soon I'm going to get a chamois Hagar.
The amount of time that it takes to heal goes up as you get older. And some kids like they heal bones in 2 weeks, and it's like nuts, and they're just right back. And even Vanderpool, like, how old is he when he broke?
Oh, yeah, he was pretty young, right?
Yeah.
Hannah? I don't know if you remember, but I think it was like 2018, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
He was young.
I wouldn't be surprised if
he's still young.
There's a whole bunch of stuff, extra stuff that he was able to take that you aren't able to take, that just access to doctors and stuff like that. But I'm reading here, 8 to 16 weeks for healing. And you want to do it in 6.
Yeah.
Like, in something that's going to be, you're not going to be trained for. Like, that's just in general, you're not going to have fun. Like,
that's the thing.
Yeah. It's just going to be miserable.
Like 8 hours on that would be if my shoulder's still jacked up and I'm not able to hold, that sort of thing. And that gets to like what you talked about too, Hannah. Like, there's a lot of bridges to cross rather than just the bone healing. There's also like, can I actually safely ride my bike for 8 hours with fatigue? Or am I going to have numbness in my hand to where I can't feel, and that's going to cause,
How about just the emotional side too of like, oh my gosh, I can't go down. Like that is, we all know that once you're afraid of crashing becomes more likely.
Totally.
Yeah.
And you fixate on it when you think about it, and it happens, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious also, just out of curiosity, you all did a lot of DEXAs, I think, a couple years back. Do you know what your bone density was?
Yeah, I was always actually pretty like it just like bell curve normal, like not low,
which is great for a cyclist.
Thank goodness.
Yeah,
because typically we're low. So yeah, luckily I thought about it. And I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't do ribs and do other things like that. And I do think it's because I'm not like I haven't sacrificed all muscle on my body. I'm not some big buff guy or something at all. Not close to that. But I'm also not like anemic and viewed as like, just a tiny little frail thing. So
even if you didn't break anything and the decision was, hey, I'm going to show up at Three Peaks, which is in Australia. I'm going to fly across the world and I'm going to be about half as fit as I usually am. No one wants to hear about that story. Like, the listeners don't want to hear that sad story. They don't want to be with you with it. They want to see the real Jonathan, right? They want to see you come back. And we had like 8 other races that you could do, or like events.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
And Europe's like, go, Jonathan. This is horrible, but like, we'll see you there. There's other places. And you can always do 3 Peaks another year, right? Now you got time to recover, and now the storyline has just gotten a lot better.
Well, if I'm frank too, I feel like a really good like potential, obviously not now. Don't worry, everybody. I'm not going to get in the pool now. But I feel like a good rehab, like for the shoulder and for everything else, would be if I'm working on shoulder stuff, but then also like swimming and that sort of thing. And if I'm totally honest, that's where like, if you ask me what I want to do now, it's triathlon. Like I really want to do, especially off-road triathlon. That's like the funnest stuff for me. Yeah. So I might, if it's okay, listeners, like shift my focus to off-road triathlon for the year. And that will probably be a good like complement to recovering my shoulder, building up strength and balance and all that stuff that I need to. Also, it'll allow running and that sort of thing too, which I would like to like, when you break a bone like this and you don't use your whole core and torso as a result of that, it's easy to build those kind of like imbalances and build all that sort of stuff. And running, I feel like, I'm not going to go sprint tomorrow. That sounds like the worst thing in the world to do that right now. But I feel like as part of like over the next 6 months, if I'm doing that versus if I'm hyper fixated on cycling to try to build up fitness to be able to do some sort of cycling race specifically, I feel like I'll be a bit more of like a more whole and fit and just healthy human if I'm doing running, swimming, and a bit of biking too, I don't know.
When is your first PT appointment?
It's next week.
Okay.
So I have a follow-up appointment. It's pretty gnarly. I'll show. I have a follow-up appointment to get like all the skin
Ooh.
stuff out
Oh yeah.
and
Ooh.
like staples and
Yeah.
all that stuff. And then
You're gonna look like Frankenstein when they take that off. It's like
yeah,
it
is
made me
yours
weak
full
in the
length,
news.
your scar with such a
I mean,
long 9 screws?
You can't really see it, but it goes from here to here.
Okay.
So yeah, and my plate's on the top. So that having the plate below is really cool. I did have, my shoulder was numb for probably over a year. I have all sensation back now.
Okay.
And it was like a really heavy backpack would kind of hurt it for a while. Not anymore. So
That's good.
it's kind of like it's there, and I'm just going to leave it there, the plate, rather than take it out.
Yeah.
And there's no issues now. It just is cool to like, I'm like, oh, I'm a cyclist, and I show people, I'm like, feel this. And
Yeah.
everyone, grocery store, I'm like, look at this. Yeah, so I think that was really good. You got a good doctor, and you got that other technique, and I think you're going to recover really well. And I think in 6 months, you'll be like, probably 3 months, you'll be pretty close to where you were before with just some fitness loss.
Sure.
And then in 6 months, you'll be back or better.
Yeah. The it's nuts. The plate and the 8 screws. I don't know if you ever looked at your like invoice from your surgery, Nate. It's $5,600 in titanium.
Whoa.
Like that's like a bike. It's like
Right? For just a plate.
Yeah, somebody's
That
getting
doesn't
really
seem
rich
right.
off that. That's something
Yeah.
aside, to the
That doesn't seem right at all.
healthcare stuff in America, but just the same, like it was a whole bike, which is just crazy to think of.
Worth of titanium.
Yeah, worth of titanium, it's just nuts. But yeah, anyways, I'll keep everybody posted as I go through the healing process,
John, do you feel safer, especially now today, being in a Xterra off-road triathlon, mountain biking, or in a road in a group ride? Like
No,
for
100% mountain bike.
that's what I
But
thought.
I don't think this changed that. Like this is a reality that I feel like I've like had, if a cat has 9 lives, I don't know how many I've had because I've ridden road so much. I've had 3 crashes on the road. This is the 4th one, sorry. So 4 crashes on the road. That's really not that many for how much riding I've done. And I've gotten out of every situation, even horrendous crashes, like crazy high speed, really bad. And I've gotten out, with lots of road rash, but fine. So I kind of, this sort of thing can always happen when you're riding on the road. There's just so much stuff out of your control. So it hasn't really changed how I view that. I always felt like going out on a ride, I was taking a risk. And it's a risk that, for better or worse, I've calculated that I'm willing to take. And that's just kind of how I felt about it. So that hasn't changed it. When I get back on the bike and stuff, we'll see. But I feel like I also have, if there's one spot where I have a lot of skill and experience, it's coming back from injuries. Like my whole life as a kid with dirt bikes and skiing and all that other thing, like I was injured a ton as a kid. So I feel like I'm got the head in a good spot to be able to pragmatically approach something and weigh the risk and not just be kind of emotionally traumatized from it. So I'm able to step through that part. But man, it's so much like, with like the triathlon side of things and off-road triathlon, it's a ton of fun, man. And I also I feel like it's really hard. Somebody probably relates to this. Maybe you've trained a lot, raced a lot. Nate knows about this for sure. Nate, when you got your FTP really high, it got to the point where you knew that like in order to get to be at that level or in order to increase past that high level, you had to do so much, right? Like you get to a point where it's just kind of like, it's like a non-linear relationship where you have to dump more and more and more in order to get less out. And like where I'm at with training and with racing and everything else, I'm at that point where I can like train a normal amount, and I can be decently fast. But then to get really fast, it just takes so much. And it takes a lot of sacrifice in my personal life, that pulls away from it. Whereas with triathlon, I can be decently fast on the bike because for me, relatively speaking, compared to the field, that's usually advantageously fast.
Your skills are really good.
And then I don't have to dump as much into that training bucket. And then I get to go on runs. And when I go on runs, I get to push my daughter in the stroller. She loves it. My son rides his bike with me. And that's like 1 to 2 hours on a Saturday that I would have been on my bike away from my family. And instead I get it with my family having fun time where we get to like build cool memories.
And Sarah's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. She gets a break. So it isn't just like totally, locking her down. And then on the swimming side too, it's like, for me, I suck so bad at swimming that I actually get a boost from just playing in the water with my kids. So it's like another great thing about it is it's like it's more of like a family thing. And I know that sounds crazy to people, but I'm also not trying to be an age group world champion here in terms of like so it's not like I'm having to push all 3 sports to some sort of max and sacrifice something else. I'm allowed to kind of balance it a bit more with the family.
Yeah,
So if I'm honest, that's like, that's where my desire lives, is just to do that, you know? So.
Well, we're all for that.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say is improvement is fun. And you're just seeking a place where you have lots of room for improvement. And I think that's super exciting. And people forget about that. Like, you know, when you first get into sport, your gains are so fast and so big. And that's part of what drives the motivation. And people sometimes will start losing their motivation when the gains come more slowly. And I think that's normal and fine. But I also think that's a good thing to remember and to seek places where you can find those easy gains. And for you and for many people, it might be a different sport, a different challenge. For someone like me, that's a reason I've always loved mountain biking, is because I feel like even within that sport, there's so many different facets to it that there is always a place where I can reach for those improvements, whether it's, okay, now I'm going to work on my high end power. I'm going to work on threshold. Okay, wow, I've really maxed that out for a while. I'm going to improve my skills because I've been doing so many interval workouts. I need to get back on the trail. Like, it's this constant moving target that for me keeps things really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. That's the stuff that keeps you going. I think I'm go ahead, Nate. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's this like, let's say inverse curve, like a U-shaped curve, where when you're younger and you have time, like you really want to be competitive and you spend so much time and you get really good. And then there's this like lull where you have kids and young kids and work and stuff. And I think a lot of people do go towards triathlon on that because it's more of like a race against yourself always. And you can compare your times on, you know, an Olympic course, the swim, as long as it's measured correctly, you can compare, right? And then the run and all of that. And there are some people that go for the win, but it's pretty rare, you know. And for age group local stuff, you can totally still compete for the win. But at a national level, like because of your swimming, you're not going to be far enough ahead for the mountain bike to come back. And then afterwards, I think there's people when their kids get older, they might get competitive again. But there's that time where you're in a road race and you can, you know, getting dropped is no fun, and riding solo for a long time. And then knowing that, hey, if I have to put in X amount of more time in order to be with these people, and it's dangerous, where triathlon is much safer too. So you have kids, and the whole running thing with kids in the stroller, that is such a big, like, draw to it. You know what I mean? 'Cause everybody loves it, and it's fun, and it's different.
You get like a Bob stroller or a Thule makes a really good one, and like your kids are going to love it. Like my daughter loves it. It's like a trip to the zoo or the field trip every time because, well, she sees a dog in a neighborhood and it's like seeing a tiger. You know what I mean? She's just she's excited. So yeah, exactly. You know, there's something to this though at the same time. Improvement's fun, but I love the process of just really putting a lot into training too. I love that. But at the point in my life right now, that like to put in enough so that I can actually have a change, which isn't like a huge improvement. We're talking a couple % or something improvement. It has enough of a downside that it makes it not worth it for me. Like it's my time away from family, the struggles that it will insert into professional life, everything else, because you're spending too much time training. It gets to the point where it outweighs and it stops being like a release and a positive thing where it's like, oh, I'm putting so much into this. This is great. You kind of have like this black cloud hanging over you too, where it's like I'm neglecting these other responsibilities, and that makes it so that it is no longer like a cup filler, and instead it's like, you know, you're constantly dealing with a drain. So it's nicer to, you know, training. It's kind of funny. Like you said, Nate, you go through an evolution with it for different people for different reasons. It is really important for me, I feel, to love the training process, regardless of like how fast I am, or regardless of the sort of improvement or anything else I'm getting, which I do feel fortunate to really love. Like the training part, I absolutely love. So that part's, I think it's crucial to separate it from the races you do or anything else like that. It's just the training and why you enjoy it.
So here's my challenge to you. I feel like hearing all of this and where you're at with your collarbone, you have two paths ahead of you and you get to pick which one you take. One, I think this is an opportunity to really embrace that process and love the fast gains that come, because when you get back on the bike to seriously train post collarbone, your fitness will be lower, your FTP will be lower, and you have the option to either look at that and constantly compare to where you were and feel like you're in a deficit, just desperately trying to get back, or you can enjoy this process of, wow, I'm back at a place where I get to make these really fast, really big improvements, because it's also going to come back quickly. And so you can either choose to kind of take those improvements for granted, like, yeah, well, I'm just trying to get back to where I was, or you can choose to celebrate each of those improvements and take a step back and enjoy that process again. And I know you and I know that you will, but I think that's really important for people with injury and with breaks. Like, people all the time, for whatever reason, have to take an extended period away from training and racing. And when they come back, they have this opportunity to make fast gains. But I see so many people lose that joy because they're just comparing to where they were rather than enjoying the process of improving from where they are.
It's big. And I think it'd be really hard to do that if you have a tight timeline of like, and pressure on you from a tight timeline, right?
Yeah. Because I forbid it. I'm not paid for it. You can't go.
Yeah. It's a good
Done.
point.
Yeah.
Hannah, we talked about bike stuff. You've got and I want to spend some time. There are 2 questions that we're going to get to from listeners. You can submit them down below in the YouTube comments, by the way. If there's a triathlon you think I should do, off-road triathlon, let me know as a replacement for this. I already have some built out in my mind, but it'd be great to get your thoughts. But we also, I want to get over, there's sometimes in Nate and an athlete changes tire companies in a year, which is honestly a significant part, or saddle companies or something. But Hannah's gone and changed bike companies and kit companies and a bunch of different stuff. You're on Scott bikes now, which Pivot makes incredible bikes that I believe are underrated. People, I don't think, give them the credit they deserve. Scott, I think that bike, the mountain bike that you'll be on, I've talked about this before, I think it was an absolute game changer, and everybody else has been catching up for the last 5 years, and I think it's due for a refresh in the next year or two. It probably is.
Look at Hannah's smile.
Yeah. Hannah let out a little smile.
Blink twice.
Yeah. But it completely changed the game, and I don't know, is it a totally different experience? And if so, how the heck are you figuring out how to set up all your bikes? Because that takes a lot of Nate, remember when you would get a new bike, or I get a new bike, we were talking about the small little tweaks that we were making for weeks to these bikes to try to get it to feel right. And these athletes are pros. They need to carry on their training volume, be doing 20 hours a week. But then you have to figure out your fit's different because bikes just fit differently. You've got it handles differently, so your fit's actually gonna have to change to match the handling. You've got a lot of variables. How are you doing it while you're trying to carry a consistent training volume?
I'm so excited. Yeah, I do feel like the bike it's a game changer. I feel like not only is the bike exceptional, but I feel like it fits me really well. The first day I went out on it, it was immediately this feels really good. I went to a trail that
it fits you better, by the way. I've looked at it and I'm wow, she looks way more. Your bike also looks more like it can be set up in an orthodox way and fit you better. Whereas trying to do different things with a fit.
Yeah. How does it feel different?
There's a lot of different elements, right? First of all, it's 120 millimeters of travel, which is a significant change.
You were on 100 before?
Yeah, 100 before. And it just feels, for me, a lot more stable. It feels very laterally stiff. It feels like when you put in the power, there's really no dissipation is the sensation. And the same in really hard cornering, or a good way, when you get on a trail and you get really nervous coming up to something and you start getting those sort of like bar shakes as you're going slowly, that doesn't exist. It just feels so stable that it feels, the first day I had it, actually, the spark that is, I went out to a trail that I've ridden many, many times. And I know on this trail, I have 3 places that I always get off the bike and don't ride those sections because they're too sketchy. I go into this trail with Clayton and he's like, Hannah, please be smart today. It's a new bike. You don't need to hit everything you always hit. I came up on those 3 sections and I was like, yeah, I'm definitely hitting it on this bike. It just felt that instantly confidence inspiring. Yeah.
Wow.
But so all of that to say, I think that's really exciting. But there's always things that you need to adjust, especially as a professional athlete where I have been called the princess and the pea. Like, I will notice. I will notice. And so even a millimeter of difference can feel really significant, I think, to someone who rides as much as I do. And so it is a process of making small changes. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is making micro adjustments. It's really easy. Despite the bike feeling so good and confidence inspiring to start with, there are still things where you're like, I don't know, like the saddle just feels a little lower or the reach just feels a little longer. And even if you measure it, it might be like, well, this is your exact fit number. There's still slight changes that, okay, your fit might be slightly different. And so I don't go and move my saddle a full centimeter at a time. I'm moving it these small amounts. And then I commit to that change for at least one full ride, because it does take a while for...
So you're not mid-ride tweaking, constantly stopping. That's big, because that's really different than what us amateurs do often. Right, Nate? We're like, we have that multi-tool and we keep it in our jersey pocket because we're just going to be adjusting constantly.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a really measured approach, where it's like you go out with an intention to test, and since you're not taking huge swings, it's also not going to throw you off and mess up your training session.
Yep.
And then that way it gives you the time to actually make sure it works.
Yep. And I also find that, at least for me, someone who is very sensitive to a lot of changes, is if I start playing that game of, okay, I'm testing this today and I'm making adjustments, I will make adjustments constantly because I'm so hyper fixated. Instead, I make the change for the first probably hour of the ride. I can't stop thinking about the change. But then how I know if the change is good is if I forget about it. And so I find that it is really important to hit a point in the ride where either, oh my gosh, I've decided for sure this is wrong because this still feels weird. Or I come back and Clayton's like, how did the change feel? And I said, oh, I totally forgot we made it. Okay, we're dialed. This is perfect.
Yeah. How much of it is, just getting used to... It's never going to feel the same as the old bike, of just getting used to something different. I've had that too, where you tweak it forever and then I just give up. And then after like a month, it's like when a new interface comes out on Instagram. It's like, this is horrible. Yeah. But then later on you get used to it and you're like, oh, this is awesome. The next one is horrible. Like how much do you think is that? It's just like after you just ride it for a few months without any changes, it's just going to feel natural.
I think it's some and both, right? Is like, I think the other thing too is to look at how you're performing on it. And that's something else that I definitely look at is, there are times where it's like, I don't know, this still feels off. Well, I did hit a power PR today, so it's clearly not that off, right? Or, well, I'm riding this trail really well, so clearly my suspension is pretty solid. And I think using the subjective and objective data together is really important. And I also think it's important, at least for me, to intellectualize what you're working through. And so by that, I mean, start with the sensation and work it backwards, because it might be, whether it's suspension or it's a fit issue or it's tire pressure, you can start very easily with, okay, it's hard if someone says, what do you need to change? Oh my gosh, I don't know. Is it rebound? Is it pressure? I don't, what?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But it's easy. What are you feeling? Well, I'm feeling like I'm getting really packed down, or I'm feeling like I'm getting bucked around, or I'm feeling like my reach is really long. And then you can work it back from there and say, okay, well, what are the things that would cause that? And again, with the bike, you can sort of go through this investigation, or with the body, you can go through that investigation. Like, well, I would feel that way if my pelvis was tilted forward. So actually, even though it feels like it's reach or stem length, maybe it's just saddle tilt. And you can kind of start working. It's this, to me, it's a fun game of almost like 20 questions.
I always just was stopped at like, I'm feeling fear. And then I just, I was like, trainer, that's the answer. I think to say too is like the team support, because you have like Nino and Kate Courtney are on the same team. Like this is
not Kate anymore, but yeah, Nino.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Not anymore? She's on the website.
How is that? I know, just recently. Is that, and since Hannah, you won't be on their factory team. You'll be racing gravel, that sort of thing. But Colton's always been like your Swanee mechanic.
Clayton, yeah.
Or Clayton, forgive me. He's like everything from the get-go, right? Like he takes care of everything. Is that still going to be the case? Or are you going to have like team staff helping at these races, that sort of thing?
So I'm still a privateer. So
cool.
I'm a privateer racing Scott bikes. So Clayton is still my team manager, team mechanic. But I think Scott does have a pretty big infrastructure at the events in comparison to the other teams and bike brands that we see. Like at the Grand Prix, Scott will be at pretty much all the events and helping all of their variety of Grand Prix athletes. And it is interesting because in the world where I strongly feel that everything's moving towards privateer, I do think that is the way of the future. But in the same breath, I think these races are getting so competitive that it's no longer a one athlete to one staff member ratio. As we start going through these feed zones and we stopping and we start needing more things, we need more people to support us. And so I'm also really excited to have more people, more hands to help with the ever-changing and growing scape that is the Lifetime Grand Prix.
Can you describe what a privateer is versus somebody on like a factory race team?
Yeah, so a privateer is, I kind of call it like I am a team of one. So I run my own team and I'm the only person on it, is sort of the way to describe it. So that would mean that for me, I create my whole book of sponsors on my own or with, I have an agent. And those sponsors each support me and pay me. And that creates my entire salary. And so each of those sponsors supporting me creates my whole program. And in the privateer space, it can be very lucrative because of that. But it also can be a lot more work because I am planning my own travel. I am hiring my own mechanic, which I'm lucky gets to see Clayton. But all of these things, I'm hiring my own photographer. I am in charge of pretty much everything from tip to tail in my race calendar. Positive, that means I mean, it's a lot of work. But the positive is you're like the CEO of your own team. You're the team manager. I get to pick what I do. I get to pick what race I go to. I get to pick what I focus on. And I think that freedom can also help an athlete perform well. On a factory team, it sort of flips, in my opinion. Everyone's going to have a slightly different view, but they will take care of everything. They'll book your flight. They'll pick you up. They tell you when and where to be, and everything is dialed. Everyone's hired. You're just showing up and racing. And for some people, that is the performance enhancer. But you are now embedded in that team. And by that, I mean, I think as a privateer, you get to tell your story and the brands become a part of your story. But on a team, you become a part of the team's story. How do you fit into the team's brand rather than being your own individual person?
And just in marketing in general with cycling, I think the individual story is so much more powerful than the brand story, if that makes sense. And like we said, the brand gets then to attach to the individual athlete story, because that's what we love, is individual performance. And when people think that I love how you said that. People think that pro cyclists can just train 6 hours and then rest the rest. And maybe some World Cup athletes that are doing that, or like Tour de France athletes, but like you said, the privateer, which more people are going towards, it's a lot of work. The amount of just social in general would be hard. Plus you're tired then afterwards. But also you get to then pick the races that are truly best for you. Exactly. And you get to skip the ones that you want to. And you can dial everything you want to. And you can mix brands if you want to, right? Like you don't have to be the whole stack that everybody else has.
I mean, this is really getting into the nitty gritty, but maybe to help show even some of those small changes is if you're on a team and you race Saturday, they're going to tell you, here's your flight. You're getting in Thursday at 3:00. And that's that. That's it. That is when you show up. As a privateer, I get to look at that and say, okay, I raced Saturday. Do I want to get there Thursday or do I want to get there Tuesday? Do I need a little extra time for this event? Do I want to stay closer to the venue? Just to me, little things like that. Yes, I have to do the planning, but sometimes the individualism is very helpful because everyone does need something slightly different to feel comfortable and confident on race day.
Do you know your Myers-Briggs? And before you say it, can I guess it?
Sure.
Do you know it?
Yeah.
ENTJ. What are you?
I'm ISTJ.
ISTJ. Okay. You seem like you want to be in control of your own destiny.
Oh yeah,
right?
For sure.
Yeah, and handle the details and that sort of stuff, and you relish in it, like.
Yeah,
definitely. And not everyone's like that. And that's why I won't sit here and say everyone should privateer, because for some people, it would not be a performance enhancer. It would be way too much on the plate. But I do think that there is a personality type and there is a place in the sport that it's what makes sense for a lot of people.
I have so many personal questions I want to ask about the bike setup thing, but I also don't want to belabor the point and have everybody that rides a road bike in here just be like, shut up, talking about suspension. So if you do want to hear that, let me know. And then maybe Hannah and I can like record that conversation, like an in-depth, nerdy, tech style conversation, maybe on the side. Hannah, you are also training down in Tucson for the winter. We've covered that. So that's enabling you to be able to be training outside with, although it's been pretty cold this year for you down there too. But then your first races, so Mediterranean Epic, that's going to be 4-day stage race. That's going to be February 6th through 9th. So people that are racing that are listening to this right now, I'm certain. So if they're there at the race, say hi to Hannah. I'm sure she'll love to say hi to you. And then also BWR Scottsdale or BWR Arizona. That's going to be March 1st. You're going to be doing that one. Are you doing any other changes? Because you've also changed Pearl Izumi as your kit company. That's a big thing too. So like, skin suits and different jersey bib combos and figuring out which one's best. And that's a whole thing, getting used to a chamois. That's like, I know it sounds crazy, but man, when you get used to one and you like one, it's really tough to adapt to another one.
It's funny hearing you say that because I think on paper, a kit change is like, okay, when you're comparing to a bike, it's like, this shouldn't be that hard. But I do feel like your body kind of like when you ride as much as we do, your body kind of morphs to the chamois. Yes. Like it feels like you get so used to this thing and you do have to take time getting used to something new, figuring out, okay, this is my new layering system. Just there are a lot of things when you're talking about high performance.
Are you using Scott saddles, grips as well? As part of like the Scott thing or?
Nope. So I have the Scott frame and then the Synchros bar. And then the other things are other personal sponsors like ESI grips and things like that.
Oh, cool. Okay. So you're able to keep like the saddle the same. It's not like a Synchros thing. Correct. Or did you change that up too?
I've been able to keep all of my other sponsors are the same, which that's another really good point, is that also helps make a bike feel a lot more like home, especially if you keep all of your contact points the same, grips, saddle, pedals, things like that make a big difference.
So you're still in Shimano? then as
Still
well
on
with the
Shimano.
drivetrains.
Yep,
That
Fox
makes
and
things more
Shimano.
familiar.
And again,
Okay.
Fox too. I'm not having to set up all new types
Yeah.
of suspension. I'm still on Fox, so I still know, okay, this is my standard setting. And then, like I said, making micro adjustments rather than starting from scratch.
Tires, are they the same?
Yep, I'm on
Wheels?
Kenda again this year.
Cool. And then are you on wheels? Are
DT
they
Swiss
DT
again.
Swiss. Okay, cool.
Yep.
So it's like those really big things that do make a difference. You've got those the
Yeah.
same. That's probably helpful.
Very helpful. Yes.
Yeah, it's crazy how much that can change the bike. Well, I'm super stoked. Are there any other changes that you feel like you're making this year that maybe sharing it with our audience you feel like could be insightful to them?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I'm in Tucson this winter, which is definitely a big change. But just sort of on that off-season build is last year, I actually raced every single month other than January of the calendar year. And so I
hard.
finished my season in December and then started it at the Mediterranean Epic that first week in February again. And so to take the off-season and the build in a month and a half period was a pretty hard, fast off season and then a pretty aggressive, fast build to start the season. And this year, I've definitely taken a little bit slower approach. I've taken a longer off season, a longer build. I think I've gotten to the same or even higher point to start the year, but I've gotten to get there a little bit more slowly, which I'm thinking and hoping that will pay off long term throughout the course of the year, which I think is the place where I had a great start to the year last year and then fell a little short at the end. So that's my biggest goal this year, is to make that adjustment.
It's like she analyzes what went wrong, makes plans, and then like goals.
The ISTJ is a logistician. I can't say the word logistician, whatever. But using data, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You got it. Using data to move forward, and it's kudos to you. A lot of people would, if they fell short at the end of the year, they're like, I'm going to train harder this year, right? Or do more earlier, right? And you're smart enough to know that you only have so many drops in the bucket for the year, and you're gonna slow it down in the beginning so you can be faster in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Jacques, I hope that's how you say your name, by the way, send in this question, and it relates to the bike thing directly. Jacques says, I'm a 15 years retired professional XC racer, jumping back into the sport to support my son. My question is not about training, but instead the equipment changes. When I raced, our entire focus was on weight. In my final racing year, my Scott scale, that's a hardtail. Scott rider, Hannah. I didn't even realize this connection here. Scott scale was 8 kilograms or 7. Whoa. That's 17.5 pounds.
For a mountain bike.
And we did, crazy. And we did everything we could to keep our bikes light. That's totally how it was back in the day, by the way. I remember this, hardtails and like I remember everybody having like triple drivetrains, but they would only run like one chainring, and then they would just have their front derailleur. They'd have the limits set up so it was basically like a catcher. So that way, because they didn't have narrow wide chainrings or clutches, so your chain could fall off. They're literally just cutting chainrings off to save weight, right? Like
wow.
it was crazy. Jacques says, now looking to get my son a new bike in a medium size. The lightest Scott Spark is 10.5 kilograms, and other brands are this weight or heavier. I think that's just under 24 pounds, 23 and a half-ish pounds, somewhere around there. So Jacques says, why did everybody forget about weight when it comes down to simple physics? Are modern bikes really good enough to make up for 2.5 kilograms of extra weight? Your bike paved the way for this, Hannah, because it was like, you have a bike that's really different than what you were on. You had a bike before that was like, it's called a DW link, or it's a suspension design system and a linkage system that's like, it can pedal well and descend well at the same time. And you can still lock it out, but it can do both at the same time. And it was like, it had that built-in compromise option kind of there. Whereas your bike now is not designed for compromise. It's like, you have 3 separate suspension settings that you can use. And wide open feels like it's a downhill bike. In the middle feels like you can pedal and support. And then locked is fully rigid. And it's got 120 millimeters of suspension. And it's not going to break any records with weight. It's not the lightest bike. It's also not the heaviest bike. It's one of the lighter full suspension bikes now in terms of the modern ones. But it totally changed this game. And it is Like, I can totally understand this. 15 years ago, like, you disappear from the sport, you wake up 15 years later, you're like, what in the world happened?
Mhm.
What do you think about this? And do you care about weight, Hannah, on your bikes?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I care enough about weight that reading this, my first reaction is to be like, "Well, that's not the lightest you can get this far." um, yeah, I mean, I think if you build it up, you can definitely get it significantly lighter than that. But still, we're not talking about 8 kilograms,
Yeah.
which is, remarkably light. And so, yes, I think especially show up to Leadville the day before the race, look at everyone's bike, you'll see that people still very, very much care about weight. People are absolutely weight weenies out there. But there are some things, I mean, talking about back in the day, as you mentioned, there was a lot of things that you didn't have then that we have now. I mean, the first one that comes to mind for me is a dropper post. That is going to be heavier no matter what. Even the lightest version is going to be heavier than just a standard high post. But to me, yeah, that is absolutely worth the wait in many courses. And that's also why you will see the professional athletes who have the equipment options make changes, is because we are making these decisions based on the course. You'll see us switch out to a high post on courses where we don't feel like that weight is worth it. But there are probably more courses than not nowadays where it is. And I think that's also a place where we're seeing a lot of changes, is especially if you look at the World Cups, at the XC courses are getting harder too. They're demanding more of bikes. And so the bikes are having to adjust in order to fulfill those needs. And some of that is adding a tiny bit of weight. But I think it's worth it when you're talking about such big demands.
How much does your bike weigh? Your new bike?
My Spark, right now I have it at about 10 kilograms. I think like if I really built it out with like the lightest tires and stuff, I could probably get it down to 9.5.
So that's 22 pounds or 21-ish pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm looking like, so my Epic right now, I'm trying to run the translation. Oh, that's not right. That's into ounces. I'm at like 22.5 pounds on my Epic. It has flight attendant. It has a dropper post. That's crazy. Like in my opinion, that it can be that light. Jock, directly, it's 100% worth it. The preservation of momentum and the amount that you can relax on your bike and just put that energy, reallocate that energy. It doesn't feel more relaxed because you just reallocate that energy into pedaling faster or going faster. Like, it's so much safer and faster. Back then, it was so sketchy trying to descend on those bikes, and you were having to use so much energy. And now it is wild how much faster you can go. On that flight attendant podcast that we did, where we talked to the engineers, they said in their test, which they acknowledged that like it might not be the same for everybody. It's just a test. It's an isolated incident. In their test, it was 2% faster with flight attendant being able to lock and unlock your suspension manually. I would love to see that test versus like a hardtail versus a full suspension bike and then like a fully optimized one with an intelligent system. Like Scott has their system Fox has their system that's on enduro bikes. It's going to come soon, I'm sure, to cross country bikes too. But it's got to be so much faster. But the big thing is, if you ask the athlete, many times it doesn't feel faster. It feels slower on the newer bikes. And the reason that it feels slower is because everything is just dropped down in terms of how difficult it was. It's like your bandwidth, your threshold just increased a ton because suddenly your bike is handling better. It's smoother. Something that was like a scary thing before is now a non-issue. Yeah. You don't even notice it.
It's that thing where you go fast in a nice car and it doesn't feel fast, and you go fast in a cheap car and it's really scary because it's like vibrating. You hear the noise and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm going 70. This is hard.
Yes. Yeah. It's absolutely worth it. Do I think that there's room to make our bikes lighter? Yes. But this brings up another thing. I think that we've all kind of also discovered that your bike actually handles downhill way better when it weighs a bit more. like a lot better. Downhill riders, they're actually adding massive amounts, like kilograms and kilograms of lead weight into their down tubes for the World Cup downhill riders because it makes their bike handle better. If your bike is super light, it just frankly does not handle well when the trail is bumpy and rough. And that's a thing to think about. Like there's probably a balancing point here between making a bike too heavy so it doesn't pedal well, but then also making a bike, just the right amount of weight so that it stays planted and composed a little better on descents. But I personally have zero desire to make my bike under 20 pounds and chase that weight. I think it would only handle worse and make me a worse rider, and certainly a whole lot poorer because it's so expensive to start shaving grams. When you break it down, like cost per gram that you're saving, it just does not make any more sense, So I think it's smart. And Jacques, your son's probably going to be crazy fast now on this modern mountain bike, and I bet he'll love it. So it's
And I
the better
bet
way to go.
he'll too if he comes back on about once he gets a bike like that with a dropper post and good suspension, he'll feel it too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, if that bike comes with Flight Attendant, again, I know that Fox has their system, their Neo system, I'm sure it's coming out too. And sorry, Hannah, I feel like I should not be promoting some sort of competing sponsor to you, but the system, the general idea, if you have a chance to ride that, oh my gosh, is such a game changer. Like it completely changes your perspective on how a bike should handle. So embrace all the new technology. It's good. It's not like it's not big bike just trying to make money off of us. We're also getting a pretty darn good deal in terms of how good our bikes work. So, okay, another question. This one's from Evelyn. We all know Evelyn Dong. She says, "Hey, Jonathan and Nate, bet you never thought I'd listen to your podcast," which is great. For those that don't know Evelyn, she's a pro. She has if you look, she's finished up high at BC Bike Race, won tons of huge races. Evelyn's great. She didn't know that you were going to be on this episode too, Hannah. I'm sure she'd be saying hi to you too. But Evelyn typically isn't the one to do like structured training, that sort of thing. Evelyn's very much on the opposite end of the spectrum. So I'm super glad you're listening now, Evelyn. Evelyn says, how relevant is high carb intake during events that are 60 to 80 minutes, specifically for junior mountain bike racers? I probably didn't pay enough attention to this when I was racing, but getting interested now that I'm working more closely with junior racers. I just heard this over the weekend. Somebody else mentioned the fact it was a cross-country runner parent, and they were mentioning the fact that oh yeah, no, they have their daughter on a keto diet, and then they said, well, she doesn't need anything like carbs like that because of what she does, because it's their races are just like 5K cross-country, so she's fine, and so they're racing somewhere around 20 minutes. It's super concerning. I think that with mountain biking athletes too, like junior mountain bikers, because their races are shorter. Like if you're in NICA or something like that, you might be racing for 30 minutes. I do hear this narrative of parents that of this deprivation narrative. That's kind of like, and I'm not saying, Evelyn, this is you, but I'm really glad we're talking about it for this reason, because I feel parents kind of go no, you need to get by with less. And we have this weird natural cultural or whatever it is tendency to go with that. So this is a super important topic to cover. Hannah, how do you feel about this? I'm starting to see carb intake way more common in soccer. When I'm watching soccer, I'm seeing players jump off the field and take a few gels when there's a timeout. I'm seeing that in motocross even this weekend, and skiing, watching people up in the booth, they're taking gels, they're doing that sort of thing. It seems like are we breaking down this whole stigma that you don't need carbs for short events?
Yeah, I think I'm glad we're talking about this. I get frustrated because I think I see two extremes, and I feel like people are struggling to find the happy medium. I think for the shorter races, you don't need to be consuming 180 grams an hour like we see in the tour, but you also absolutely need carbs. So the idea that some junior is doing a keto diet just absolutely blows my mind and makes me feel sad on the inside. So there's a happy medium of looking at these shorter races where, generally speaking, working with the dietitian that I work with, you're looking at about 45 grams of carbs per hour in a 60 to 90 minute effort. And that's because it's a short effort, when I'm doing longer efforts, like 4+ hours, I am hitting that 120 grams per hour. But it's a little less for these shorter efforts because you aren't going into as big of a deficit across the length of that short race. So one of the reasons we need so many carbs in the long races is to limit the accumulated deficit that we acquire hour over hour over hour. But in these short races, we don't have as many hours to limit. And so we just want to make sure we're getting enough to keep us moving at top fueled speed the whole time. So that 45 grams an hour is probably going to be your perfect happy medium for the 60 to 90 minutes. But the place that I see this also go completely awry with juniors is that number happens when you're coming into the race fully fueled.
Yes.
And this is a place where a lot of juniors will struggle. A lot of kids skip breakfast because they love sleeping in. And then a lot of kids also, for example, at NICA races, they might wake up with their team. Maybe the team does like team pancakes in the morning. Excellent. Love to see it. But then they don't race again, or they don't eat again until their race at like 1 p.m. because maybe all their friends are racing all morning and they're running around cheering them on, and they don't eat again until they're mid-race. So I think for a lot of junior racers, we need to also be focusing on what that pre-race nutrition looks like.
That's a super good insight. Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Pfaffenbach, am I saying his name right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, who's been on the podcast a lot. He harps on this where he takes like, world-class level athletes. They eat carbs at short races like this, and they perform better. And he said soccer players are one of the hardest ones to do because of tradition. I think juniors too really focus on weight because their power to weight ratio is insane when they're still in puberty. And I think it's easier to get, not easier, but it's extremely easy to get into that, disordered like eating kind of way and not focusing on carbs. And I too, the keto for an endurance athlete who's young, like, cause you don't need it. You're there's a health concern,
mind-boggling.
But you're going to go slower no matter what, right? There's so much evidence on it. No fast pro does this. Like no Olympian goes into keto and runs any distance race fasted or in a ketogenic diet. So
I mean, even in super, super short efforts, like 30 minutes, a carbohydrate mouth rinse is still shown to increase
scientifically
performance.
Absolutely.
Scientifically. And so even when you don't, quote, need it because you are fully, quote, topped off, your body still responds well to knowing that fuel is incoming. Even if you don't actually swallow the fuel, take it in, have it go through your system, just it touching your mouth is enough to signal to your brain, oh, we can keep pushing because we have help coming.
And we know that, like, so they come in stocked up, and then and you want your muscles loaded with glycogen, right? And then your liver, you want that also. And you want some, I think, glucose in your bloodstream. And having that gel right before the race and then during the race, especially for mountain biking where it can be hard to eat, like a gel or in your water bottle, if they are using a water bottle inside of there. Like a water bottle, I think is not maybe necessarily needed in 60 to 80 minutes if it's cold weather, but hot weather for sure. And just, and I would try it in practice, but I wouldn't say 150, especially for a smaller body, but I think you could go more than 45 an hour and train these kids to just for long-term recovery, and that their whole career of cycling is going to be better if they just get used to it now and they train their gut and they can take in a little bit more, and the next day they're going to feel better. It's not going to, an extra gel during a race is not going to be anything bad. As long as they're not having stomach problems,
that's what
it's just going to only be positive.
Yeah. As long as you don't have stomach issues, if you can take in more, do it. There's really no downside to that.
Yeah, these kids are pinned for 60 to 80 minutes. Like Like the intensity is something that we can't imagine us adults, like how hard they ride for that 60 to 80 minutes. Those kids are burning some pure high quality sugar when they're on that bike. Like they're ready to burn. A practical approach for this, because a lot of these kids, especially if you're racing NICA or like the junior mountain bike leagues, chances are you have like waves of races and different heats, and it goes on for a long time. And it's really easy for these kids to go off and playing with their friends on their bikes until their race starts. And then suddenly you show up and you haven't had a gel, and then it feels tougher. One thing that I think is really good that I've seen done with these kids is have 2 gels with you when you get your kid on and then you go out, and whether you're just riding around with your friends beforehand, but have 2 gels with you. And, if these are really big gels, like I know like Precision Fuel and Hydration makes gigantic gels or something, but I'm talking like a normal gel that's going to be somewhere around 20 to 40 grams of carbs, right? That's how they typically are. Take 2 of them with you. And then that way, what you can do is when you start your warm up, you can be taking in your gel. And then when you go to the line, you can also just be sipping on that gel as well. Like just, taking little bits in. I think that that's a good combo pairing up with what you said, Hannah, of making sure that you're and you don't need to like eat a ton before these races, but you just need to make sure that you hit breakfast. You need to make sure that you hit something like lunch. Maybe you have to shift it early because of the race, but you're just making sure that you're having carbs during those times. And I think that'll really, really help out. The research, if 60 to 80 minutes, that's not far off of what we see with professional World Cup racing. It's really not. And if indeed we saw that there was no performance benefit, we wouldn't see these people going to the feed zone, taking in gels, taking in mix. They'd just be taking in water. So I know that we have this tendency to think they're just kids. It's just a short race. They don't need it. But I think that it's better. And 1 vote 4 bottles during that race for the kids. I think it's great to get kids with bottles and some sort of, carb electrolyte mix in there, because doing gels I've seen in the junior races can be hard for kids. Like the feed zones can be really chaotic with all the parents. Maybe not all those parents are really good at hand ups, right? So then you have in that, and then you have a bunch of people all packed into one spot. They're super excited because it's their kids. It's really chaotic. If you can just give them a bottle with their carbs in there, and they can sip on that how they need to. And the cool part is since it's a 60 to 80 minute race, chances are they can get by with 1 small or tall bottle, and that covers the whole race. They never even have to do a hand up. But this is super important. And for kids in particular, I know that like there's a lot of fear around like that we hear in just normal, non-athletic people culture, where it's like kids taking in too much sugar. We always have to keep in mind this difference between people that are active and our bodies and how it handles sugar when it's active and when it isn't. If your kids are ever getting guff from somebody because they're taking in carbs, help your kids know that like it's totally okay. Your body's using that. It's super cool. It's like it's designed to use this for what it's doing. And if you can give your kids the confidence behind that, that'll make them feel a whole lot better with those choices. And because they will get guilt probably from somebody telling them that they, oh, you need that stuff, or oh, you shouldn't take that and it's not healthy. On the contrary, it's super healthy.
I with Kyle's podcast, Dr. Pfaffenbach, I played that for my son who is 11 and in soccer. And he now drinks Gatorade during practice and games, and he talks about it's his secret weapon. Everyone else doesn't do it. That's why you're gonna do it. So, and he says he notices a difference. He says that he can go longer and he feels better during running around, and that kind of approach of we're on cutting edge science, and it's really helpful to have like the words come out of a nutrition coach at the highest level saying that a lot of people aren't doing this, but this is what's happened. And more than just dad saying, oh, this is what it is, right? Even though, I'm kind of in the industry. I don't know what podcast that is, but how often does that happen where, John, like your kids don't listen to you, but someone else does the exact same thing and they're like, oh, wow. That could be beneficial too if they're not believing you.
Yeah.
That's also a place I'd love to see coaches who are on the ground for these kids step into the space is, for example, like Jonathan, you said taking a gel 15 minutes before the start. Well, that's usually when staging happens. And so that could be a great time, maybe in the morning at the team meeting, everyone needs to give the coach a baggie or a gel with their name on it or something like that. And then the coach now has these gels, and that's when they go up to give that kid their last, you got this today, good job, you're going to do so great. You hand them the gel. Same thing with soccer at halftime. When you show up to start warm up, everyone hands the coach, the assistant coach, whoever has the capacity to handle it, their nutrition. And at halftime, it's handed out to each kid. I think as kids, it can be hard or intimidating. Like, it's another thing to remember. You have to be the one to walk over to the table to grab the food, which if there is a stigma, that can just elevate the emotion. But if someone's handing it to you that's trusted, that is an authority, and saying, here, eat this, it's going to benefit you, I think it takes away some of that. Like standing on the start line, coach hands you a gel. People aren't now like, oh, why are they taking that? They're like, oh, what? The coach is giving him that? Maybe I need that. Oh my gosh, should I have planned that? I think that can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think of this in my own brain this way. But if I were coaching kids and they had that thing where they had the pancake breakfast, great, and they weren't going to race though until 1, I'd have little packages of rice labeled their names that says like jet fuel on it. And then set the timer 2 hours before, you got to eat your jet fuel, and make it like Montessori where you don't throw away the extra. You just do it back to see what everyone ate, and you can talk to them of like, were you full? Like, what did you not want to eat it? What was the reason? Or did you eat it all? How'd you perform? And you get that kind of feedback and work with the kids rather than just say it. But exactly, when the coach is saying it and it's like part of the program, I think that's a lot easier when it's standard. And you're right, the other teams are like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But labeling it like that and then giving the evidence of the kids externally to yourself, or maybe a coach is enough evidence for them rather than a parent, because it's, the authority spot's a little bit different. And I think coaching in general, there's probably a different conversation, but coaching your kid in general can be very hard on the relationship. I think it's best as a parent just to be like, everything is amazing, listen to your coach, right? Inside of that, and be supportive of whatever that coach says. Help your kid in a positive manner on that, because giving critical feedback to your kid all the time on sports,
it's hard.
Can be hard, right? The
kid has to really tough.
Exactly.
Yeah. The last thing I'd mention, Evelyn, is that don't let the focus on race day and everybody else listening to this make you lose focus on training days. Because a lot of these kids, if they're part of a NICA program, they get out of school and then they have like bike practice at 5 or something. And who knows what they've had. And a lot of the time during lunch, who knows? They were like throwing their food on the wall and seeing if it would slide down faster rather than eating it or something, So like, you never know what's going on. And it's really helpful to make sure that they come into those practices and everything. Like Alex Wild has like a really good saying. He's like, when I turn the pedals, I start eating. Like, and that's like a thing that he has in his mind that like, if I'm riding my bike, I should be like fueling myself. And it'd be really cool if we could help kids understand that too, that like, if I get on my bike, I'm fueling, and then that might help it so that they don't feel so exhausted after a long day of school with not enough nutrition on the bike. So,
yeah, I find that to be a really big barrier with kids. Like you're saying, what did you eat for lunch? What did you eat before practice? Because on school days, it is so hard and it creates really inconsistent workouts. And then it's hard as a coach to actually know where this junior rider is at, because, well, they failed their last 3 workouts, but they also didn't eat before those last 3 workouts. So it's hard to know where they're at and how to push them forward. And I feel like in those circumstances, you simply can't keep moving forward until the nutrition piece is addressed. And so maybe this is also a place, again, where the coach at practice can help address these things so that the parents don't have to push it as much. And maybe it's not publicly so that no one's shamed, but maybe, I don't know, maybe you have note cards at practice every day where every kid can write down, hey, just let me know what you ate for lunch. Let me know what you had before practice. Hand me the note card. And then you can, keep track of that. Maybe it's on, if you have an online training system, maybe you're putting notes there, but I do think that it's something that should be documented daily so you can keep track of the patterns.
This is the last note I'm going to say, because I'm just thinking about this. We talked about like, somewhere around 40-ish grams of carbs is probably like enough. there are examples of younger athletes. I'm thinking of 2 athletes that were in our high school league here, and they had plus 360 watt FTPs. Like, they were just absolute machines. Those athletes need more. They're burning way more. So like, make sure that, chances are they might know that if they're that deep into the training pool or they're like that fit, but they might not. So if you're a parent or a coach with those sort of athletes, make sure that you're looking at actually how many calories they burn. It puts you in check really quick. They can, when they're doing NP of 370 watts for 60 minutes in a race, that's a whole lot of sugar gone. So
I agree with Hannah, but also I'd be, at the younger ages, I wouldn't even ask them what to eat, just because I don't want them to think about it during the day. I'd be more like, at practice, this is what you do, and not be like, how many carbs did you eat during lunch? So that they don't start thinking about it.
I don't mean how many carbs, but if it's like, hey, what'd you eat for lunch? And they say nothing. Don't you want them to make sure that they're saying like, oh, I had a PB&J. Okay, check.
Maybe like, did everybody eat lunch?
That's what I mean.
Yes, great.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be like, what did you eat for lunch? I had a peanut butter jelly sandwich and a bag of Doritos and 2 tater tots, or anything like, I don't want them to really write it down what they had. Just because it could, there's that road starts early. I just like the idea of more. These kids aren't going to like, we talked about it so much. It's not going to be an issue. That's a good point.
And just to be clear with that writing down idea, I would never be criticizing it on a like, oh, this wasn't healthy enough. I mean it in terms of a lot of kids aren't eating enough. And I think my idea was if they have to write down the word nothing, it might hit them more of like, oops, than just continuing to not do it.
And I think a great practice, like you mentioned there, Nate, like a great practice is like forward-looking proactive stuff where you're just like, oh, we're at practice. We have carbs. We're at practice. We do that. And then that way,
it's
because...
like stretching.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like our son never eats his lunch. He comes home and it's like, he has like 6 things in his little like bento tray box that he takes to school. And it's usually like 2 out of the 6 are eaten, and that's just how it goes. And for a while when we focused and we kind of were like, hey, like there's still things in the trays, like what happened? But now we just focus on like, you're home from school. What are we having for snack? Like, it's like, it's really, because it is really tough it's just complicated. It's a complicated thing to work through, man. Evelyn, in your case, just encourage your kids to nourish. And if you can proactively encourage them to do that, they'll be in a great spot. And parents and other kids and adults, if you're listening to this too, the same advice goes for all of us. Hopefully it's all helpful for you. Hannah, thanks a bunch. Super excited to watch your season kick off, new things for you. It's going to be super exciting. If you want to go follow Hannah, you can do it. We'll link to her Instagram down below. If you have not yet, you signed up for TrainerRoad, you got to. The amount of positive feedback is just incredible and amazing that we've had coming into we actually have a channel in Slack, right, Nate, where we collect like positive feedback, and that channel's on fire. It's pretty fantastic. It's great to see. So all of you, if you haven't signed up for it, it'll build a custom training plan for you. It'll serve like your coach and make you faster. Go sign up. We'll talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.